So the coding process that we do in the CCA is what we call co-constructed grounded theory. Co-constructed grounded theory. Can you tell me why it is called co-constructed grounded theory?
Is it because we're co-constructing that with the participants?
So we are co-constructing that with the participants, but what is the framework through which we are co-constructing? We are co-constructing by going back and forth between the theoretical framework of the CCA and the emerging voices from the margins, subaltern voices. So the meta-theoretical framework of the CCA is all about voice, yeah? That voice as an expression of human agency exists at the intersection of culture, structure, agency. So you will always be looking for that culture, structure, agency pattern as a way for making sense of discourse and as a way for enabling the emergence of the subaltern voice. So we only work through that framework so that it builds up the opening for the voice to emerge and constructs its own theory.
Okay.
So this is something you have to sort of understand as a two-layer process. One is, and I think you think of this as dynamic. So you begin by, you think of the CCA, the culture, structure, agency framework as an outer shell, and the inner shell being the voice. So the outer shell, it supports this inner shell to come out. Now, when that inner shell comes out, that will become the foreground, and the outer shell of culture, structure, agency will move to the core. So there is a movement in this analysis. So sort of you think about this as cascading layers. So the layers move like this, and then they change positions. So at the end, what you should have is really a subaltern theory, a theory from the subaltern context that should be at the center. Like we can talk about the Santali theory of health, or the Dongria Kond theory of health, or a Maori theory of health, the Kaupapa Maori theory of health. That becomes the center, but that is anchored in this conversation of culture, structure, agency. So when you read my piece, the Santali theories of health, which we are going to do for the next class, you will see that one of the core themes of that theory is that health is about ecology. Health is about what happens with trees and what happens with nature. So that becomes the foregrounding theory, while sort of it is anchored in the culture, structure, agency interplay. So through this is what Kathy Sharma talks about as co-constructed grounded theory. So there are three elements that you have to think about when thinking through co-constructed grounded theory. First of all, as a researcher, so, early day anthropologists, for instance, used to say that, we will come up with a Maori theory of health, or a description of Maori understanding, or lay Maori knowledge of health, or a lay Santali knowledge of health. Often in doing that, and these were often anthropologists that would come from the outside and study a culture. In doing that, they often erased their own positionality. So this is a key element of the CCA, which is, when we talk about building infrastructure for voices of the margins, one way of doing that is by making visible your own positionality. That you as a researcher, as a participant in that process, your voice is very much part of that process. And we try to sort of disrupt this differentiation between the researcher and the researched. It's not as if the people are the data and you are the observer. Your voice in there is part of that process. So why am I saying this? Because at each stage of the analysis, as you go through that, a big part of the analysis is your own self-reflection, your own reflection on your own privilege and how that privilege is tied to what you can hear and what you cannot hear. So part of this reflexive process is about really turning the lens inward. So bringing this back to the data analysis, what does this mean for the analysis? If you pull up, the analysis incorporates 3 stages. Open coding. Now, when you're doing the open coding, you're going through each sentence. And for each sentence, you're writing down beside it what is the theme that is captured by the sentence. So say, for instance, some participants, I'm just giving an example, if you read your transcript, you might see in one line somebody is saying, you know, when I think about health, I think about the fact that I really struggle with food, that I don't have enough fruits and vegetables to eat, I do not have enough healthy things, and I have to rely on fast food. So it is as simple then, when you're looking through that open code, to write it down as food and health. So, or you can even write it down more simply like quality of food and health. Or you can write down, someone might say that it is about how much food I have. So that'll be quantity of food and health. So basically the open code will try to stay as close as possible to the main concept that is reflected in the sentence. Now, as you're doing this, you will also keep up another file where you start memoing and your reflections. Like when, for instance, you're saying that, hey, you know, I went to conduct this interview, and one of the things I was thinking about is when to schedule the interview. And even though that's my uncle, I came to it with my own privilege and thinking that this is the time that would work, and how that got dramatically changed when I started having the conversations. So at that point, you're interrogating your privilege, and you're actually, with humility and vulnerability, attending to how is it that your own approach to something puts blinders on what you're able to see and not see when engaged with a particular context. So the same thing with the food then. Say, for instance, when I'm noticing that, say, in Iberia, participants are saying that, you know, quality of food, we just can't access fruits and vegetables. Now, I live in Iberia, so I know that there isn't really a grocery store here. We have to go to the square to go to the grocery store. And in that grocery store, once you enter, say, a bag of apple right now is $3.75. So I'm going to make down all those notes and say that, you know, what I notice is, you know, things that I take for granted, which is, for instance, how much would it cost to get access to a bag of apple? So that I will write down in my own memo.
Oh.
Are you following what I'm saying? So it's almost as if you have 2 Word files. One is the document of the transcript on which you can make notes by hand, or you can make notes in the comment section by introducing track changes. And for each sentence, there can be a comment introduced that captures the theme. If I'm doing it on pen and paper, at the side, at the margin of the page, I will start writing for each sentence. And in a separate document, in the memo, I will write down my own thoughts. Now, of course, when you're starting this process, the more time you spend memoing, the better it is, because that's what keeps you, you know, I think of this as meditation. So what happens when you meditate?
Some kind of positivity, you feel fresh. Yeah.
Okay, positivity, fresh, yeah. But what is it that you're basically doing when you're meditating?
Well, for me, it's about just clearing away a lot of thoughts and trying to center yourself, take notice of your own health, your own breathing.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So noticing what is going on in your body, paying attention to what is going on in your mind, and attending to yourself. So we talk about meditation as mindfulness because it's a way of bringing us to this moment, here, now. So you think of this kind of reflexive analysis as trying to center yourself into the here and now, where your dialogic encounter is with the text of the transcript. And as you write the open code, you focus your attention on what is the here and the now. How are you feeling? What are you thinking? How are you relating yourself to the text? Now, one of the things, therefore, in the beginning, you will see is that this is taking a lot of time. Like to analyze one page, it usually takes me about 15 to 20 minutes. And I say that that's a very good thing because I am actually immersing myself in the dialogue, in the conversation. Now, you will see that technology today has moved a lot. So in a lot of places, people use a software like NVivo, you would have heard about it, where people punch in the transcript and the software comes up with the categories. And that's why Phoebe said that the CCA has its own way of coding. Part of that is because, at the heart of CCA is listening and dialogue. So you can only listen if you're paying attention to the text as it is embodied in your interaction with you. Software cannot capture that. A software cannot capture the context within which you're negotiating the text. Okay. But what you will find is that later on, so this is very time consuming in that sense, but what you will find later on is that as you do more and more of this, you fall into a rhythm, which is great. But at some point, you also have to be mindful when you're falling into the rhythm, because that often has a tendency of taking us away from being reflexive and attentive to the moment and to the text. So can we sort of look through, Christine, your transcript with the idea, first of all, that we are going to just do the open code, okay? And with the open code, we are going to read each sentence and talk about what is the theme that is closely reflected in the sentence. Remember, with the open code, your goal is to stay as close as possible to the text. So I'm not looking for higher order thinking, just a nutshell summary of the concept that is embodied in the text. Do you want to get started with the transcript?
Yeah.
So let's go from the beginning, yeah?
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So it is go out camping with our mokos and go out fishing and go out on picnics and all that. It's all good for us health-wise and everything. So how are you coding this?
Family time, environment.
Okay, okay. So what sticks out here, and if you stay really close to the text, Christine, I would say family, and then I would like you put it, spending time, and then I would put it in there, out or outside or outdoors.
Okay, outdoors.
Out is a common theme in all of that.
Go down a bit further, she shares that she's got emphysema.
Yes. Can you sort of tell me what code will you use in there?
Is illness one? Or can I just put emphysema? What she's got? She's got a challenge.
Yes.
And there's a struggle there to be able to go into town. So they only go once every 2 weeks. So mobility, there's mobility challenges.
Yeah, so there is, first of all, there is a condition, a chronic condition, emphysema.
Yeah.
Then with the chronic condition, what I would put is challenges.
Okay.
And challenges relate to what? Repeat prescriptions, and then as you say, mobility.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, you see, this is where the culture, structure, agency framework comes in, Christine, because not only she's talking about the challenge, but then she's talking about how does she solve it? How does she solve it?
By arranging the days that she does go into town, that's when she does all that she needs to, unless she really has to, then she will.
Right. So basically, arranging / rearranging time. So basically, in a nutshell, she tries to minimize the number of times she has to go into town. But also, when you put arranging, rearranging time, you will put a hyphen with that, and you will put in benefits day. Because what is telling you is that the time that she goes to collect the benefits is when she tries to run all the other errands. You see?
Yeah. Yes.
Is this making sense?
It is, yes.
Okay, let's keep going.
So then when I asked her what if she gets sick, and she says she will ring up the hub, which is a medical facility.
The health hub, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
And if they have to go into town, well, they will if it's an emergency.
Exactly. So how will you put that?
Emergency situation that prompts them having to seek health care.
So basically, this is really interesting because it is about healthcare access and healthcare users. So what this is telling you is that they usually ring up the hub, right?
Yeah.
And then they actually physically go in when there is an emergency. So I would put this in as access - emergency, with the idea that you're accessing only when there is an emergency, otherwise you're ringing in, right?
Yeah, health access, saying.
Right. Now this is where the mindfulness comes in, Christine. If you look at this, because I wouldn't know to ask this question, but you, of course, do, which is as a building on this conversation, then you ask, do you still make Kumara Ho, Rongwa Maori medicine and that? And this participant says, no, we haven't got the leaves because it's so hard. There's an outfit in Palmerston where they sell the Kumara Ho in the little bottles. So how would you code this? If it were me, I would code both your question and their response.
And for my question, maybe is it access to alternative or to Maori health?
To Maori treatment or
Yes.
to Maori healing, access to Maori healing. Beside that, you would put it hardship or difficulty.
Okay.
And then you would put in resource in Palmerston North.
Okay.
Now, this is the point where I would go in and memo. So this is the point where I would stop and I would say, hold on a minute. Now, the reason I asked this question is because, and then I would go in and elaborate on that. So why did you ask that question?
Because I knew that they know how to make it, that they used to make it for their house.
Lovely.
Because she didn't mention it, because she mentioned about the hub going into town, then that's why I just wondered if they were still making that. And if not,
right.
Right.
Excellent. So I would actually then, just this conversation, I would record it and I would make note. Now, sometimes, of course, this complicates it further when I have the time, and I, of course, now it is very difficult, but when I really want to cherish this process, what I will do is I will actually take a recorder with me as I'm transcribing, and I will just keep writing. And then whenever some thought comes to my mind, I would just turn on the recorder and talk to the recorder. Like at this point, I might turn on the recorder and say basically what you just said. That, hey, because, for a lot of Maori, it used to be that Maori medicine was one way of taking care of everyday health, not the emergency kind of health, but everyday health, like if you had a flu or something. So I wonder to what extent, people in this community are still doing that.
Yeah, okay.
Let's keep going. Now maybe Pooja, you can take turn. So, I meant to say, can you actually read Christine's transcript and tell me what some of these open codes will be? So go to the next one.
They're not around anymore, but otherwise we go and get us some kakawaka at the domain. Get us some kakawaka around.
Yeah, those are different leaves.
Okay. So it says like it's already made up in bottles and you just have diluted in the first sentence?
Yes.
So probably the code would be alternative medicine?
No, that is too broad.
Okay.
Don't use terms like, don't say alternative medicine is you are bringing in a terminology. Don't do that.
Okay.
Stay close to the text.
Okay.
Here, I would just read it as available in bottles. Then I would put it in there. The next one would be lack of availability because they are not around anymore.
Okay.
Then the next one I would put in when not available, get leaves. So they actually go and get the leaves directly.
Okay.
And what is that, Christina, what is at the domain? What does that mean?
A domain is a kind of a park area. There's a river and a whole lot of trees. And it's close to where they live.
Okay, so you might actually just say that domain in parentheses, you might just put in a park, where there are trees available. I'm sorry, I actually missed it. You asked next, you mean the domain? Where's the domain? And they said just over here, it's kind of a park. I've forgotten the name of it. So basically, again, availability of the medicine, which is the leaves on the trees in the park. So what this is telling, this is very powerful. Yeah. Can you tell me why? It's really, really beautiful. What is it that is so beautiful here?
Is it because they have what utilizing ways of looking after their own house other than the mainstream ways?
Yeah, but think about it. They are basically drawing upon Maori traditions of healing, but these are not elsewhere, somewhere exotic. You don't have to go to some exotic place. You are surrounded by them. It is the mundane and the everyday. You can just go to the park and look at some leaves and pick the medicine. So what that tells you is that in this sense, health is everywhere and health is here. It is not in some exotic location.
Okay. Oh, okay. Right. Yeah.
So Christine, when you're doing that, that is where you will write down now your memo.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
You will write that down in your memo.
Uh-huh.
Do you have any questions, both of you? Does this make sense, what I'm doing?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I had a question. So we have to add quotes which are close to the text, really, not broader ones.
You have to stay close to the text. So you do not add your own meanings, your own interpretations.
Okay.
So basically...
So can we add in the memo we are writing our interpretations? No.
What did I say? What is the memo about?
It's like the idea, the thoughts that come in.
Yeah, your thoughts, your feelings. So you can put those down in the memo.
Okay.
But the main thing here is to remember to stay actually very, very close to the text. Okay. This is what is called a close reading.
Okay.
Then Christine says, just over here, you mean the domain? Where's the domain? Just over here is kind of a park. I've forgotten the name of it. it's not the esplanade, no. Then they say it's out this way. So there they are trying to find out what. I would just put all of these together under the location
Okay.
where the healing can be found, right?
Okay.
So how about you just keep doing this? The next step will be after you're done these open codes with at least 18 to 20 transcripts, then we will start putting these together in what we call buckets.
Okay.
That is called the axial coding, where we put them in buckets. What we do there is that codes that are similar to each other will be housed together. But at this point, I will not sort of go into that because I sort of want you to just stay focused on reading these texts and doing the open codes.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's great. That's awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Lisa?
Okay. Thank you, you both.
Yeah.
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.